Life in New York City was always hectic, but there was one thing that was always consistent in my life: tennis. I was introduced to the sport by my parents who played it casually, and we happened to live 10 minutes away from a local tennis academy called Harlem Junior Tennis. I was about 12 years old when I started seriously playing at the academy, and I began with the beginners, which was a grassroots program. This infantile part of my tennis journey was important to me because not only was it where I learned the basics of the game, but also because I met some of my closest friends there to this day. It was about halfway throughout the year where my friends and I realized we had the skill to advance, but I purposely stayed back because the next group was led by a coach who all called Doug. Doug was the fattest coach with the smallest temper. For reference, picture Fat Albert, but a grown man. Coach Doug's infamous rage could be heard as soon as you stepped a foot in the bubble, and his screams echoed across the courts. If one kid was late, Coach Doug would yell at the whole group, and would make them run laps for a minimum of 30 minutes, nonstop. And if they didn't keep pace, Coach Doug would throw tennis balls at the players. In the sweltering heat of summer training, Doug would have the other group do suicides, and after they were empty in terms of energy, he would yell at them from his bullhorn-like voice for them to run up and down the football bleachers. Me and my friends saw this horror and decided we would have no part in that pain. However, there was a coach above him that we really wanted to work with, and his name was Coach Daniel. Both Coach Doug and Daniel had a great appreciation of the sport, and both made sure the players were serious and intense on the court. But Daniel's approach was different. Daniel was smooth, joked with the players on break, and would join them during match play, and he didn't yell. The empathy that he showed us made me want to be coached by him, but first I had to go through Doug. I figured if I proved myself, we could quickly advance from Doug's group and join Coach Daniel's group, but it wasn't that simple. After months with Coach Doug, honing my skills, and yet to impress Coach Daniel, an opportunity would finally present itself: team tennis. Another coach posted preliminary information about team tennis on our bulletin, and after quickly glancing over it, I begged my dad to sign me up for it. For those of you who don't know, team tennis is a format in which a tennis academy or club can make up a team of multiple players, and the team can play against other academies of the same level or age. I figured team tennis was my opportunity to shine because it allowed me to show my compatibility with my teammates, my skill set, and my mental toughness. In fact, I was so confident in my ability to excel, I asked Daniel to watch my first match. It was an early Saturday morning, and as soon as we arrived, our team faced a problem. Some of our teammates couldn't show up due to scheduling conflicts. Before the doubles match started, my confidence in the team started to dwindle. It's all right, I said to myself. We can win without them. I'll just go through my usual warm-up, and everything will be fine. Boy, was I wrong. Looking back on it, we should have seen that we were going to get crushed, but our vision was clouded with confidence. The match started poorly, it was poor in the middle, and it ended poorly. The first issue is that none of us were aligned with our partners in terms of strategy. Secondly, I had zero mental toughness at the time and got pretty frustrated every time I made a mistake. Lastly, our racket skills were sloppy and we couldn't keep up with their pace. What felt like an eternity for me and my doubles partner was one of the quickest games I've ever played. In 20 minutes flat, we got our butts handed to us and hopped back on the road. Coach Doug heard of our loss, and the next time we came to practice, it was eerily quiet. We ran until the bottom of our feet felt like they were engulfed in flames. Next, Coach had us hit volleys for time, and if one person messed up, we'd have to start all over again. Yep, I said to myself, I need to get to Daniel's group. So I worked overtime. Any second I could get, my dad would take me to our local park and feed me balls, or I'd hit the wall alone, honing my craft. My dad would watch me through the black gate that separated the wall from the court and would wait patiently as I hit the ball hundreds of times. It was mundane and boring, but seeing my dad through the gate encouraged me to keep going. After the first week, I quickly became impatient with this process, but my dad reminded me that Rome wasn't built in a day, and that dedication is about going the distance. So I kept training. All those days felt like a Rocky montage without the extra music, as I finally began to improve after months of extra training. I began practicing at a higher level, and Daniel finally began to take notice. I communicated better with my teammates, and we worked on hand signals and tactics. Our next team tennis matches, we dominated and felt like a well-oiled machine. I began to win. I was finally given the opportunity to play under Coach Daniel, and it was quite an adjustment. The standards of everything was higher. Kids ran faster, kept their endurance for longer, and were stronger. As one of the youngest players, I was by far the worst player there in all aspects, and I wanted to quit almost every day. However, what kept me going was my drive to consistently get better. Throughout the years, I would drastically improve under Coach Daniel's guidance, and time again, Coach Daniels helped me rise to the occasion against my opponent. For example, I had the opportunity to play a national tournament in Florida, and it was my first finals match in front of a crowd. Not only were my teammates there, but more than 200 players and parents filled up the silver bleachers. It was about halfway through the match, and nothing was working out. I was snotty-nosed. I could barely grip the racket because I was so nervous. My black Nike cap was filled with sweat. The 90-degree weather combined with the humidity didn't help. It felt like hell's armpit, and on top of this, I was losing. I remember losing an easy point because my feet felt like cement, and after the changeup, Daniel finally gave me some game-changing advice. The number one mistake I was making was letting my opponent have time on his side, which allowed him to take a large swing and crush the ball. Coach Daniel pointed out that if I came to the net and hit strokes out the air, I'd win more points. Unfortunately, taking time away from your opponents isn't exactly an easy feat, and meant I would have to work even harder when my tank was close to empty. I was on the verge of tears explaining this to Daniel, and he understood it, but he told me I needed to push myself beyond my preconceived limits if I was to win. Plus, it was my last match anyway, so I literally had no reason to not squeeze every last drop of energy I had. He finished his 3-minute speech with some motivational mantra that I don't exactly remember, but I knew what had to be done. Coach Daniel always knew exactly what to say. I went back out there and attacked every ball furiously. I didn't worry about conserving my energy, and after every point, I could barely breathe, but I just focused on pushing myself beyond my preconceived limits. All I focused on was Coach Daniel's advice. Point by point, I turned the tide of the match. When the situation looked bleak, Daniel seemed to always know what to say, how to push me to a level which I didn't know I had. Somehow, I pulled it off. After the match, he talked with me again, and I thanked him, but he said it was all me, even though I knew it wasn't true. I told him I couldn't have done it without him, and said all he did was ignite the spark I already had. In fact, he told me one of the reasons why he allowed me to move up was because when nobody was watching, while others slacked off and when others were better, he noticed I didn't stop trying. He saw I had the spark. The last thing he said that day was anytime I felt like things weren't going my way, remember to ignite this spark. I kept this mentality throughout all my matches, even when I lost and even when no one was watching. I kept that mentality because even if my opponent was technically better than me and no one would notice if I tanked the match because I was already losing, having the spark meant fighting to the last ball. Without the combination of Coach Doug, who taught me to harden my body through physical training, and Coach Daniel, who elevated my technical game, but more importantly hardened my mind, I became a better player in person. Not only does the spark help me in my tennis, but it translates to my entire life. When life got tough, I remember that speech Daniel gave me all those years ago about the spark. The last time I saw Coach Daniel was when my close friend and I were hitting at the same local park for my formative years. It was a perfect day, not a cloud was in sight, and life could not have been better. I remember playing a practice set with my friend, and Coach Daniel was watching us through that same gate, smiling. After the match, we caught up to speed with Daniel, and I told him how things were going at my new school. He said he was proud of how much we both improved and would love to stay longer and hit with us, but he had to go. Now every time I go back to my local court and go on court, I always think about Coach Daniel smiling through the gate and the many words of wisdom he gave me. Thank you.
Please welcome our next speaker, Mr. Will Creevy.